He was a single dad barely making ends meet when a wrong call woke him at 2 a.m. Most people would have ignored it, but he didn't. He got in his truck and drove into the rain, never imagining who would be waiting, and how that night would change 3 lives forever. If heartfelt, powerful stories about second chances and quiet courage move, you make sure to subscribe and join us. Now, let's begin. Single dad got a wrong call at 2 a.m. He showed up anyway, and the heiress asked him to stay forever. The rain didn't start with a whisper that night. It came like a warning, heavy, relentless drumming on the tin roof of the modest one-story home in the outskirts of Trenton, New Jersey. Miles Cooper was just finishing the last of the dishes in the sink, hands raw from the warehouse shift and still faintly smelling of motor oil and old cardboard. He glanced at the clock, 1:57 a.m. He should have been asleep hours ago, but Eli, his son, had woken from another nightmare. It took a warm blanket, a reheated grilled cheese, and a 20-minute loop of ocean waves to calm him back to sleep. Now the house was quiet again except for the storm. Miles dried his hands, picked up his old mug, and poured the last of the lukewarm coffee. That's when the phone rang. He stared at it. Unknown caller. 1:59 a.m. He should have let it go to voicemail. No one called with good news at this hour. But something in instinct he couldn't name made him pick it up. "Hello," he said, voice low. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice cracked and uneven. "Please, don't hang up. Just come." 1425, Willow Creek. I can't breathe. Please." Click. Miles blinked, looked at the screen. The call had ended. The house was silent again, save for the hum of the fridge and the distant roar of rain. It would be easy, normal, even to dismiss the whole thing as a prank, a wrong number, maybe even a bad dream. But the woman's voice. Something in it wasn't fake. It wasn't playing for attention. It was raw, ragged, real. He stepped into Eli's room and checked on him curled under the space-themed blanket, clutching his stuffed bear like it was the last safe thing in the world. Miles brushed the boy's hair back, whispering a silent apology. 2:07 a.m. The truck engine groaned as he turned the key headlights, cutting through sheets of rain. Willow Creek Drive was 15 minutes north, winding into the wooded hills above town where the old estates were remnants of another century's wealth. Miles had been there once years ago, delivering granite tiles for a renovation job. But 1425. That address didn't ring a bell. The GPS led him past gated properties and moss-covered signs until he reached a rusted mailbox nearly hidden under ivy. 1425, Willow Creek. No gate. The driveway stretched uphill like a tunnel between towering oaks. He hesitated. His heart thudded. This was insane. He didn't know who was up there. What if it was a setup? But he thought of that voice again, the way it cracked like something had already broken inside it. He drove up the winding path. The mansion, if it could still be called that, stood like a shadow out of another time. Stone walls streaked with moss, shutters hanging crooked. The front porch sagged slightly and the brass knocker was tarnished green. But the porch light was on. Miles killed the engine and stepped into the downpour. He took the steps 2 at a time and knocked. Silence. He was about to knock again when the door creaked open. She stood barefoot in a silk nightgown drenched at the hem. Her hair clung to her face, dark and wet, and her eyes were rimmed with red. She held a crystal glass loosely in one hand, half full with something amber and shaking. And she looked at him like she had seen him before. Or maybe wished she hadn't. "You're not him," she whispered. "No," Miles replied gently. "I got a call. This address. A woman in distress." She blinked, looked past him into the rain. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattered on the marble floor. "I thought." "I called my therapist," she said, voice paper thin. "I must have hit the wrong number." Her knees buckled. Miles caught her before she hit the floor, arms instinctively wrapping around her trembling frame. He guided her inside, past the broken glass into the grand but faded living room. An ornate fireplace sat cold and lifeless beneath a crumbling portrait. He eased her onto the tufted couch, fetched a blanket from the nearby chair, and draped it around her shoulders. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked. She shook her head. There's no one left to call. She wasn't drunk, not really. Grief had a way of making people look like they'd been drinking. Her eyes were too lucid, too tired. "Do you have a name?" she asked after a long pause. "Miles Cooper." "And you just came." Her voice trembled. Didn't feel right not to. She looked at him again. Really looked, and something in her gaze shifted, like a cracked mirror catching a sliver of sunrise. "I'm Alina Royce," she said, "and I haven't let a soul in this house in 4 years." The fire sputtered to life minutes later. Miles had found matches and dry logs in a bin near the hearth. As the warmth filled the room, the rain softened outside like it too had said what it needed to say. Alina sipped warm tea, now silent eyes fixed on the fire. "Why did you stay?" she asked without looking at him. Miles thought for a moment. "Because someone called me like they didn't want to be alone, and I know what that feels like." A long silence stretched between them, comfortable this time. He stood unsure if it was time to go. "You don't have to leave yet," she said softly. He turned. "You can sit a while, if you'd like." Miles nodded and lowered himself back into the armchair. Outside, the rain had not stopped, but inside something had begun. Something small, something human, something that stayed. Morning arrived hesitantly, pushing aside the last hush of the storm. The mansion at 1425 Willow Creek looked less haunted in daylight, but no less lonely. A pale sun filtered through sheer curtains, casting fragile light across worn wooden floors and chandeliers that hadn't sparkled in years. Miles woke slowly, unsure for a moment where he was. The armchair beneath him had molded to his shape, and the smell of ash and old tea clung to the room. Across from him, Alina Royce still sat on the velvet couch, asleep, but upright, her blanket slipping from one shoulder like a forgotten promise. He checked his phone. 6:52 a.m. A few missed messages from his neighbor Mrs. Henley, who watched Eli when emergencies arose. He texted her back quickly, "All okay, we'll be home soon." As he slipped his boots back on, Alina stirred. "You stayed," she murmured, blinking into the half-light. Miles nodded. Didn't seem right to leave. She looked down at her lap. "I should be embarrassed. I must have fallen asleep mid-sentence. No need to apologize. You were tired." Alina pulled the blanket tighter around her and stared at the fire's dying embers. "I'm not used to people staying." Miles hesitated. "Do you want me to go?" She opened her mouth, then paused. "No," she said finally. "Not yet." They moved to the kitchen, once grand but now dusty with disuse. Miles found a French press in the back of a cabinet and some dark roast beans still sealed. The coffee was surprisingly good. Alina leaned against the marble island, cradling her cup with both hands as if to warm more than just her fingers. "You ever been here before?" she asked. Miles nodded. "Once. Years ago. I delivered stone tiles for a sunroom. Didn't know it was this house." Alina smiled faintly. "It was my mother's obsession. The garden conservatory. She believed beauty could fix anything." Could it? Alina was quiet for a long beat. Not the kind she meant. There was something delicate about her, like a snowflake caught between melting and freezing again. But beneath it was steel, Miles sensed. A woman who had known loss, not just sorrow. She didn't wear her grief like a wound. She wore it like armor. "Can I ask?" "What happened?" he said gently. Alina traced her finger along the rim of the mug. "It was a flight to Aspen. My parents, my younger brother, they'd gone ahead. I was supposed to follow the next day." She looked up, her voice thinning. The weather turned. Their plane went down over Wyoming. Private charter. No survivors. Miles lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Everyone was. For a while. Then the cards stopped, the calls, and people moved on like they always do. I didn't. You stayed here, I disappeared here, she corrected. I had money but no reason to spend it, a name but no need to say it. So I stopped. She sipped her coffee. Until last night. Until I panicked. Miles leaned forward. You didn't panic. You reached out. That's different. Alina tilted her head considering that. Maybe she said, but I still called the wrong number. He offered a half smile. Or maybe the right one, just not the one you intended. A flicker of something passed through her eyes, relief perhaps, or doubt softening for the first time in years. Mid-morning, Alina offered a short tour of the house. The vast corridors echoed under their steps. Faded family portraits lined the walls, smiling elegant people forever frozen in time. One painting stopped Miles in his tracks. A young boy about 10 stood next to a dog that looked half wolf. The boy had mischievous eyes and a face eerily like Alina's. Your brother? She nodded. Charlie. He was the only one who knew how to make me laugh until I snorted. Miles chuckled. That's a rare skill. They reached the conservatory glass walls and roof, now streaked with grime, but sunlight still streamed in like a memory. Ferns and forgotten vines clung to the stone. It was beautiful in a wild, unkempt way. This used to be my favorite place, she said, before I stopped growing things. Miles looked at her, then at the dirt-crusted planters. You ever think about starting again? She shrugged. What for? Who would see it? You. Before he left, Alina walked him to the front door. She held it open, the wind tugging at her sweater sleeves. Thank you for coming, she said softly, even if you weren't supposed to. You're welcome. Miles hesitated. Look, my son, Eli, he's 9. He's different, special. If I'd told someone else last night I had to leave him with a neighbor so I could check on a stranger in a storm, they'd think I was crazy. Alina smiled, something flickering to life in her expression. But you did it anyway. Yeah, he said, because sometimes people need someone to show up. She nodded. Then after a pause, would you come back? Maybe, if you're ever not working. You know the garden could use some help. Miles didn't answer immediately. He thought of Eli, who always asked where he went, who often asked why his mother never came back. Maybe he said, if the coffee's as good next time. She laughed quietly. Deal. As he drove down the long, winding path back into the world, Miles glanced at the rearview mirror. The mansion still stood like a memory, but now it didn't seem so empty. And somewhere behind its windows, someone who hadn't asked anyone to stay in 4 years just had. The next few days passed like an echo. Miles couldn't quite shake. He returned to his daily routine, early shifts at the loading dock, grocery lists scribbled in fading ink, helping Eli with his reading exercises, but something had changed. It wasn't just the memory of the rain or the firelight warming Alina's face. It was the feeling that he'd been invited into someone else's silence and asked in a wordless way not to leave it behind. On Thursday evening, he found Eli sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, organizing his world into neat, color-coded piles, red cars, blue marbles, yellow blocks. Dad, Eli said without looking up, when people go away, does it mean you did something wrong? Miles froze. His heart tightened in that slow, familiar way. Nobody, he said, gently kneeling beside him. Sometimes people go away because they don't know how to stay. That's not about you. You came back, Eli said, setting a red car down carefully. Miles smiled. Always. That night, while Eli slept with his hand still resting on the edge of a toy fire truck, Miles sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and his phone. He stared at Alina's number still saved as unknown, his thumb hovering over it. Then he pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Miles. Hey, he said. Hope it's okay. I called. More than okay, she replied. I was hoping you might. I was wondering if the garden still needs help. A soft laugh. It needs more than help. It needs a resurrection. I've got Saturday off. Come by. I'll make coffee." And just like that, he was going back. Saturday morning arrived crisp and gold with early spring light. Eli insisted on coming, and Miles hesitated. Alina hadn't met him yet, not really. What if it overwhelmed her? But something in his son's quiet hopefulness made him say yes. They pulled up to the estate just after 9 a.m. Eli sat silently in the passenger seat, eyes wide as the old house came into view. "It looks like a castle," he whispered. Alina stood at the door before they knocked. She wore jeans, gardening gloves, and a flannel shirt with sleeves rolled to her elbows. The sight of her outside that house looking more alive than the first time they met struck Miles like sunlight through clouds. "You must be Eli," she said, crouching down slightly. "I've heard good things." Eli glanced at his dad, then nodded once. "I like castles." "Then you're going to love the greenhouse," she smiled. The conservatory was a glass and iron skeleton of its former self, overgrown and tangled, but still beautiful. Ivy reached toward the cracked panes like it was trying to remember the shape of light. Soil sat dry in the planters. Beneath one table, a broken trowel lay like a forgotten relic. "This is where my mother used to teach me Latin names for flowers," Alina said, brushing dust from a terracotta pot. "I hated it. But now, I don't know, maybe it was her way of holding on to things that bloom." Miles rolled up his sleeves. "Let's give her something worth holding again." Eli wandered quietly from planter to planter, touching leaves, whispering names he made up on the spot. Crawly green, spiky snake vine, leafy sea monster. Alina laughed when he told her a geranium was secretly a superhero. It wasn't a polished, polite laugh. It was sudden, real, and it startled her enough that she looked down almost embarrassed. Miles noticed. "You don't laugh often, do you?" Not, since she replied softly, the sky fell. He didn't press her. Some wounds he knew needed time before they were named aloud. Instead, he changed the subject. "This place has bones. We could sand down the benches, clear out the broken pots, even build a new compost bed outside." Alina smiled. "Are you offering to be my garden architect free of charge?" he said. "But I accept coffee as currency." As the day wore on, the three of them fell into a quiet rhythm, digging, clearing, organizing. Alina moved with the cautious determination of someone learning how to live again. And Miles watched Eli do something rare, relax. At one point, Eli tugged Alina's sleeve and pointed at a patch of old moss near the garden wall. "It's soft," he said, "like the carpet in my favorite book." She knelt beside him, touching it. "It is," she said. "I used to sit here with my brother. He'd make up stories about the vines being dragons." "Did he go away?" Too, Alina swallowed. "He did, but he still visits. In here." She touched her heart gently. Eli mirrored her motion, then looked up at Miles. "Can I come again next time Miles met Alina's eyes?" She gave a small nod. "Yeah, buddy," Miles said. "I think we'll be back." Later, while Eli played in the yard, Alina and Miles sat on the back steps sipping coffee from mismatched mugs. "He's remarkable," she said, quiet but present. "He sees things I miss. He's always been like that," Miles said. "Sensitive, aware. The world's loud for him, but he listens anyway." She nodded. "I forgot what that feels like. Being heard." Miles looked at her, not speaking, and in the space between them something began to root. Not romance, not yet, but something more essential. Recognition, a shared quiet, a steadying. "You know," she said, "I thought when my family died, I died with them. I let the silence become my entire world." And now he asked. Alina stared out at the greenhouse where Eli was pretending to command vines with a stick like a wizard. Now the silence has company. As they drove away that evening, Eli looked out the window and said, "She's not sad like before." "No," Miles said, glancing in the mirror at the woman standing on the porch waving softly. "She's starting to grow again, and as the sun dipped behind the trees, the road ahead no longer looked so long. It looked like it might be leading somewhere worth going. The first week of April crept in with unseasonal warmth, melting what was left of the frost and bringing with it the scent of damp earth and lilacs barely blooming. Miles and Eli returned to Willow Creek every other day after school and worked spending late afternoons in the greenhouse, slowly taming the wilderness. Alina seemed different with each visit. Still reserved, yes, but the stillness inside her had changed shape. It no longer felt like absence. It felt like someone remembering how to live. Eli called her Miss Alina and had decided she was officially keeper of plant names. She accepted the title with mock seriousness, jotting down his invented species in a little leather notebook. Miles watched them from the side, sometimes wiping sweat from his brow with a worn hand towel, struck by how easy the laughter came now. How natural the three of them looked in the sunlight. It was one of those late afternoons after Eli had gone off chasing a dragonfly with a stick when Alina cleared her throat. "I want to make you an offer," she said. Miles looked up from the pile of broken terracotta he was sorting. "Oh, don't worry," she smiled. "Not marriage." "Yet?" He chuckled. "That's a relief." I left my tux at the laundromat. But when she didn't laugh in return, just stared down at her gloved hands, he knew she was serious. "You're spending hours here working, fixing things, making this place breathe again. And I have all this space, rooms collecting dust. I was thinking, what if you and Eli moved into the guest house just for a while?" The words landed in him like a stone in still water, quiet at first, then rippling outward. "Alina." He started, but she held up a hand. "Not charity, not pity. I'm not trying to save you. This house has been a tomb for too long. But when you and Eli come here, it feels like something new is growing. And I want more of that." He didn't respond right away. She didn't rush him. He looked past her to the greenhouse now cast in the gold of the setting sun, where Eli crouched beside a cluster of budding tulips. Then down to his own calloused hands, stained from years of work that rarely paid enough. A part of him wanted to say yes, wanted it so badly he ached. But another part hesitated. "I've spent my whole life working for everything we have," he said slowly. "We don't take handouts. I've made a point of that. For Eli's sake." "Then don't think of it as a handout," she said. "Think of it as a partnership." He raised a brow. "The house needs restoring," she continued. "The grounds are a mess. I can't manage it alone. I'm willing to hire someone, but I'd rather it be someone who already knows the soul of this place. And you bring more than just labor. You bring intention." Miles blinked. "That's one hell of a job title." Alina finally let out a soft laugh. "Then consider it a residence with purpose." That night, long after Eli had fallen asleep in his bed surrounded by plastic dinosaurs and art projects, Miles sat alone on their sagging sofa trying to think straight. What was he so afraid of? The offer was genuine. Alina wasn't the type to manipulate or guilt anyone. And truthfully, their current apartment was falling apart, leaky pipes, spotty heat, and the constant drone of traffic through thin windows. Eli hated it, especially the unpredictability of loud noises at night. But they'd survived worse. Still, what would it mean to live there? In her space, would they be guests, workers, something more complicated? He thought of Eli that afternoon running barefoot through the grass completely at ease. He thought of Alina not as the heiress or the recluse, but as a woman still quietly rebuilding herself who had looked him in the eye and asked him to stay. The next morning, he packed up a box of Eli's books and some basic tools and drove back up the winding path to Willow Creek. Alina was on the porch when he pulled in reading with her feet tucked beneath her on a bench wrapped in a light shawl. He held up the box as he stepped out of the truck. "I assume this means yes," she said, standing. "It means we'll give it a try," he replied. "On 2 conditions. Go on." "1, I want to help with utilities and maintenance. Not just labor. Shared responsibility. Fair." "And 2, he said, grinning, Eli gets his own garden bed. Alina laughed. Non-negotiable. They settled into the guest house that weekend. It was smaller than the main estate, but charming stone walls, ivy climbing up the chimney, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of rosemary. Miles worked on minor repairs during the day, and Eli started painting a mural on the garden wall with Alina's encouragement, a messy, brilliant swirl of trees, animals, and stars. That Sunday evening, after Eli had fallen asleep curled against a pillow he declared smelled like leaves, Miles and Alina sat on the back steps watching the fireflies blink to life. "It's strange," she said, voice low. "I thought I'd feel like I was losing something. Giving up control, letting someone in. And do you—" She shook her head. "No, it feels like I'm getting something back." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They sat in the stillness side by side, not touching but tethered by something just as strong. The moon rose full over Willow Creek that night, casting the house and its gardens in soft silver. And for the first time in years, every window glowed with light. By the second week of April, the estate was breathing again. Not just metaphorically real breath. The kind that rose from tilled soil, drifted through open windows, and clung to skin like pollen. Birds had returned to the oak branches, and even the old house seemed to creak a little less under its own weight. In the early mornings, Miles would wake to Eli's excited footsteps bounding down the stairs of the guest house, eager to check on the seeds he and Alina had planted. Sunflowers, tomatoes, something they called dragon peppers, though Alina insisted they were bell peppers. She let him believe otherwise. That Tuesday morning, Alina waited in the conservatory with 2 cups of coffee and a clipboard. "Good morning, resident groundskeeper," she said as Miles stepped in, wiping his hands on a rag. "Resident, I'll accept. Groundskeeper jury's still out." She handed him one of the mugs and tapped the clipboard. "I made a list. Don't judge me." He glanced at the paper. Notes, sketches, and color-coded to-do items filled the page. It was obsessive in the most endearing way. "Alina, this is either genius or mild madness." "Both," she replied cheerfully. "I used to do this kind of thing when I was still in corporate, except it was boardroom layouts and event charts. You worked in the family business." Her smile faltered slightly. "For a while, until everything ended." Miles sipped his coffee, giving her space. "I wasn't supposed to be the heiress, you know," she added quietly. "Charlie was the favorite, the golden one. He was younger, but more like my father, charming, bold, always the one with the bright ideas." She reached into a drawer beneath the old potting bench and pulled out a worn photo. 2 kids sitting in the sun mud on their clothes, a garden hose coiled nearby. The boy was grinning. The girl, Alina, had dirt smudged across her cheek, but a rare, genuine smile. "He wanted to build a flower maze," she said. "Said we could charge tourists $5 to get lost." Miles laughed gently. "Smart kid. He was brilliant, and impulsive, and kind." She paused, and then one winter he didn't want to wait for the family to travel together. Took the earlier flight, the one I was supposed to be on. The weight of her voice landed softly like snow. "I changed my ticket last minute. Cold feet, or maybe just intuition. I told him I'd meet him there. And then—" Miles reached out and placed a hand gently over hers. "You're not responsible for that choice." "Aren't I?" she whispered. I stayed. He didn't. "You survived," he said. "That's not a crime. It's just cruel math." She looked at him, her eyes brimming but not yet spilling. "It still feels like betrayal." Later that afternoon, Eli came running through the conservatory doors, waving something in his hand. Miss Alina, look." He held out a small leaf shaped like a heart speckled with purple. "I found this near the willow. It's magic." Alina crouched to his level, studying it like a rare specimen. "You might be right. I've never seen one quite like it." Eli beamed. "Can I put it in my book?" "Only if you give it a proper Latin name," she teased. "Hardicus purplina." Miles chuckled from across the room. That's got scientific journal written all over it. As the two of them cataloged the new discovery, Miles stepped outside and wandered toward the west side of the house, an area he hadn't explored much yet. Ivy tangled thick here, and a path of broken stones led to a smaller enclosed garden surrounded by rusting wrought iron fencing. Curious, he nudged the gate open. It creaked in protest. Inside was a quiet alcove, circular and intimate. Overgrown roses sprawled across trellises. A cracked marble bench sat beneath an arch of flowering dogwood, and in the center a small stone pedestal. Atop it, a plaque, tarnished but legible. To Charles Royce, who made everything grow. Miles exhaled slowly. A memory garden. He didn't touch anything. He didn't need to. The air carried something sacred, grief, yes, but also celebration. A place built by love, not obligation. He returned to the house without telling Alina where he'd been. Not yet. That evening, after dinner, they sat outside under strings of old fairy lights Alina had found in a drawer and insisted on reusing. The bulbs flickered gently, casting a soft glow over the deck. Eli had fallen asleep, curled in a hammock with a book half open across his chest. A drawing of Hardicus purplina had fallen to the ground. "He's happy here," Alina said. "Yeah," Miles replied. "He hasn't clung to me at night since we moved in." She looked at him, then not just looked, but saw him. A man with lines at the corners of his eyes and sun on his neck. A man who'd carried his son through fire and kept walking. "You're a good father. Some days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Maybe that's what being a good parent means. Holding it anyway." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Alive. Like soil that's just been turned. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not asking me to be someone else. For not fixing me." Miles smiled, quiet and warm. "You're not broken. Just growing back." They sat like that until the stars bled into the sky and the night folded over them like a gentle quilt. And from inside the house, unseen but steady light spilled onto the porch, the kind of light that could only come from people staying, from people belonging. The day the storm returned wasn't marked by thunder or flash. It arrived quietly, an unease in the air, the kind that makes animals restless and people pause mid-sentence without knowing why. The morning had been soft and uneventful. Eli spent an hour in the conservatory with Alina painting ladybugs on rocks and lining them up along the windowsill. Miles had fixed the hinges on the back gate and started building a new trellis with reclaimed wood from the barn. But by late afternoon the sky had dimmed. Not in a dramatic cinematic way, just a slow dimming of color as if someone were turning the saturation down on the whole world. Alina stood in the greenhouse doorway, arms crossed, watching the sky, the way someone watches a familiar wound about to open again. Miles approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "You okay?" She didn't answer at first. "Do you ever feel it?" she asked. "Like something inside you knows it's going to unravel again." He studied her carefully. "Sometimes." "Yeah." She forced a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm going to make tea." Inside, Eli sat at the kitchen table drawing a new flower he had invented. He looked up when Alina entered and immediately sensed the shift. "Is it going to thunder, I think?" "So," she said, trying to sound light. "Will it be loud?" Alina hesitated, then crouched beside him. "It might be. But we're safe here." He nodded slowly, tracing a line on his page but not finishing it. From across the room, Miles watched. Something in Alina's posture had changed. Rigid, guarded, like someone preparing for impact. The rain came around 6. First a drizzle, then a downpour. Eli tried to stay calm, but the sound of water pounding the roof, thick, relentless, unfamiliar, started to unnerve him. He paced the guest house, his hands flapping slightly, eyes darting to every creak. "It's not like at home," he whispered. "It's louder." "I don't like it." Miles crouched in front of him, grounding him with both hands on his shoulders. I know. But we're okay. It's just water. It's like the roof is getting a back massage. That earned a small smile. A breath. Miles exhaled. Do you want to go to the main house? Maybe it'll be quieter. Eli nodded. They ran through the raincoats over their heads and arrived soaked at Alina's door. She opened it with a strange look, part worry, part something else. Storm's getting worse, Miles said, shaking off his coat. I know, she said quietly. Eli made his way to the living room, curled up under the thick throw on the couch. Alina sat beside him, stroking his hair with a hand that trembled just enough for Miles to notice. He didn't say anything. He went into the kitchen to warm milk, added a hint of honey, and brought it to her. She took it with a nod of thanks. Then it happened. A sudden crack, closed jarring. Lightning followed by a sharp clap of thunder. Eli cried out instinctively, burying his face into the couch. Alina froze. Miles moved toward his son, kneeling beside him. You're okay, bud. I'm here. I wanted to stop, Eli whispered, tears threatening to spill. Alina stood, rooted eyes locked on the window, breath shallowing. Her lips moved as if she were counting, but it wasn't working. Her hand clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white. Alina, Miles asked gently. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked quickly toward the hallway. He waited until Eli had settled again, head resting on a pillow, eyes closed but not asleep. Then he followed her. He found her in the darkened study, back pressed against the bookcase, chest rising and falling too fast. She didn't see him at first. Breathe with me, he said softly, stepping in front of her. In and out. She shook her head, tears spilling down now. I thought I was okay. I really thought you are okay, he said firmly, but it's a storm, and storms wake up things we bury. She sank to the floor, shoulders trembling. I should have been on that plane. If I had, maybe they stop. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. Don't go back there. You didn't get on that plane. That was not your fault. Then why does it still feel like I broke everything by surviving? Miles knelt beside her, voice quiet but unwavering. Because grief lies. It tells you that your survival cost something it didn't. You didn't take anything from anyone. You lost, too. She wiped her face, shaking her head. I was supposed to take care of Charlie. I promised my mom. You were a sister, not a shield. Silence stretched between them, heavy but necessary. Then after a moment she whispered, I'm scared of being whole again. Of forgetting. You're not forgetting, he said. You're making room. Later, when the storm had passed and the wind softened into rustling leaves, Miles returned to the living room. Eli was asleep, peaceful now, curled like a question finally answered. Alina stood nearby, watching him. He trusted me, she said, even when I froze. He didn't run. He knows you care. That's what he sees. She nodded. Then, without thinking, she reached out and touched Miles's arm lightly, like checking if he was really there. Thank you, she said. For what? Staying. The next morning, the air smelled clean, reborn. The garden shimmered with dew. In the silence that followed the storm, 3 people woke in a house that had finally let the past echo and then let it go. And somewhere quietly, something deeper than comfort had taken root. Not just healing, but trust. The sun returned 2 days after the storm, golden and gentle as if apologizing for what had passed. The earth soaked it up greedily. So did the people at Willow Creek. But something in the air had shifted. Miles noticed it first. Alina was quieter than usual. Still kind, still present, but distant in a way she hadn't been since the beginning. She moved through the house like someone rehearsing the role of themselves, smiling at the right moment, saying all the right things, but something was missing beneath it all. He didn't push her. He'd learned not to chase people into their silences. But Eli noticed, too. On Saturday morning, as they sat on the porch steps, Eli clutched his sketch pad and stared off toward the greenhouse. "Miss Alina doesn't laugh anymore," he said softly. "She'll laugh again," Miles replied, brushing a leaf off his son's shoulder. "Did I do something wrong?" The question hit Miles like a sudden wind. "No, buddy. Not at all." Eli pressed his pencil down a little too hard, snapping the tip. "She liked my dragon peppers. She still does." Eli didn't reply. He got up and walked into the house. Later that afternoon, Miles found a note on the kitchen counter. In Eli's handwriting, crooked, careful, full of emotion, he didn't yet know how to say. "Dear Miss Alina, I don't know if you're sad because of the storm or because I'm not funny anymore, but I think you're brave. And I like your flowers. If you want, you can borrow my red crayon. It helps when I feel mad or gray. Love, Eli." He read it twice, heart tight in his chest. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into a small brown envelope. That evening, when the estate was quiet and the sun had melted into orange, Miles made his way to the main house alone. He found Alina in the study, her back to him, flipping through a leather-bound photo album she'd left untouched for years. "I wanted to give you this," he said, holding out the envelope. She took it with both hands, fingers trembling just slightly. Her eyes moved across the page. She didn't cry. She smiled. And something cracked, not broken, but softened. "He's remarkable," she whispered. "He sees people, even when they're trying not to be seen." Alina held the letter to her chest, then looked up at Miles. "I thought I was ready," she said. "After the storm, I thought something inside had shifted for good. But it's harder than I expected to stay open when you've lived closed for so long. You don't owe anyone a perfect version of yourself," Miles said, "but I want to be better. For Eli. For you." He stepped closer. "You are better. You're just not finished yet." She looked down at the envelope again. "He offered me his red crayon," she murmured, laughing softly. "That's love, isn't it?" "That's Eli," Miles said. "And yeah, that's love." The next day, Alina returned the crayon in person. She walked down to the garden where Eli sat on his small wooden stool, sketching what appeared to be a cross between a tomato plant and a rocket ship. "Hi," she said. Eli looked up surprised, but not afraid. "I got your letter," she said, kneeling beside him. "Are you still sad?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I'm trying to be brave like you." He studied her for a moment, then offered the crayon again. "Keep it longer this time," he said. "Red is strong." Alina smiled. "Thank you." "I made you something too," Eli said, rummaging in his bag. He pulled out a small laminated card drawn in marker. "Official Garden Club membership. Miss Alina. Level Brave Flower." She took it like it was a medal. Later, Alina found Miles in the workshop sanding down an old bench. "I want to reopen the greenhouse," she said, eyes glowing. "Not just for us, for other kids, other families." Miles paused mid-sanding. "You mean like a program?" "Yes. Art, gardening, sensory spaces, a place where kids like Eli and parents like you can feel safe." He turned to her, eyes full. "That's a big step. It's not just about healing anymore," she said. "It's about giving something back. Charlie would have wanted that." Miles nodded slowly. "Then let's build it right." In the following days, Alina and Miles began drawing up plans. She reached out to contacts in her old network, therapists, educators, designers. For the first time in years, she returned to her name. Not as an heiress, but as someone with purpose. Alina Royce, Director. Willow Creek Center for Growing Things. The website domain was bought, blueprints were drawn, meetings were scheduled, and still every morning she returned to the garden first. To the boy who offered crayons instead of answers, to the man who showed up when no one else did, to the life she hadn't known she was still allowed to choose. One evening, after a long day of cleaning out an old wing of the estate, Miles walked into the conservatory and found something waiting on the potting bench. A small, red-painted flower pot. Inside it, a folded card. Miles 4 showing up. for staying, for making space for us to grow. You are now officially master of quiet courage. The Garden Club. Underneath it, drawn in bold strokes by Eli's hand, was a badge with stars and a wrench crossed with a flower. Miles laughed, then blinked hard, then placed the badge in his wallet like it was made of gold. That night, under a full moon, Willow Creek shimmered with more than dew. It shimmered with belonging, with hope, and with the unmistakable joy of someone who had returned not just to a house or a garden, but to herself. The reopening of Willow Creek had begun as a whisper, but quickly grew into a chorus. What had once been a quiet refuge was now humming with the sounds of revival tools clinking, plans unfolding, and laughter echoing through the once-abandoned hallways. Local therapists had toured the space. Teachers had expressed interest. Donations started trickling in after Alina quietly shared the vision online. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't hiding. But not all ghosts stay buried. It was a Wednesday morning when he showed up. Miles was loading soil into the new sensory garden bed out back, and Alina was inside preparing for a Zoom call with a children's wellness nonprofit. A sleek black BMW pulled up the gravel drive like it didn't belong, and knew it. The driver's door opened and Lucas Heiress stepped out. Tailored jacket, designer shoes, and that unmistakable air of someone who never questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Miles wiped his hands on a towel, standing slowly. He didn't know who the man was yet, but everything about him triggered a quiet alert in his bones. "Can I help you?" Miles asked evenly. Lucas barely glanced at him. "You're the one who moved in." "The gardener." "Something like that." Lucas turned toward the main house, already climbing the stairs. "I'm here for Alina." Miles didn't stop him, but he followed. Alina was just stepping out of the study when she saw him. She froze. "Lucas," she said, voice quiet, unreadable. He opened his arms like no time had passed. "Alina! God, you look." He stopped, studied her. "Different. What are you doing here? I heard you were building a charity project in your backyard," he said with a smile too white, too polished. "I had to see it for myself." Miles stayed behind near the hallway. Alina glanced at him briefly. Her shoulders squared. "It's not a charity. It's a center for families, for kids who need a place to feel safe." Lucas shrugged. "It's just surprising. The Alina I knew didn't do dirt." Alina didn't flinch. "Maybe you didn't know me as well as you thought." Lucas stepped closer, voice dipping just enough to sound intimate. "You know, your name still means something, right? You could be anywhere. New York, Paris. Why bury yourself in this old mausoleum?" "Because this mausoleum saved me," she replied, "and it's going to save others." Miles didn't realize he'd moved closer until Alina's fingers brushed his. Lucas's eyes narrowed. "So this is your new project?" he asked, voice cold now. "Handyman turned life partner?" "Don't," Alina said, calm but firm. "Don't diminish people because they live differently than you." Lucas scoffed. "I'm just saying, be careful. This place is your last name. You start inviting people in, especially ones with stories. It doesn't take much to ruin what's left of your reputation." Miles stepped forward, then quiet but steady. "You should go." Lucas laughed bitterly. "Of course. The muscle speaks." But Alina stood straighter. "Lucas," she said, her voice now sharp with grace. "I built a life with marble walls and quiet dinners and the right names on my arm. And I was miserable. So, no, I don't need protecting, and I don't need you." A pause. "But I do need people who stay when it storms." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, words failed him. After he left, Alina stood on the porch in silence. Miles joined her, not speaking. She exhaled slowly. "That man once asked me to marry him on the balcony of a yacht off Santorini. I'm guessing you said no." "I said yes." Miles turned. "Really?" "It lasted 6 weeks. My grief didn't match his image of me." "I can't picture you on a yacht." Alina smiled faintly. Neither can I anymore. They stood in the quiet, the wind rustling through budding vines. Then she looked at him. Do you ever worry the past is going to knock everything down again, every day? Miles said. But I build anyway. That evening, Eli returned from school to find Alina sitting in the garden with an old box beside her. Inside were photographs, letters, and mementos, pieces of her past she hadn't touched in years. I'm going to tell you a story, she said as Eli sat cross-legged beside her. About someone I used to be, and why I'm not her anymore. She spoke carefully, choosing words Eli would understand, but not watering down the truth. About love that looked perfect, but felt cold. About people who only stayed when it was convenient. About realizing that real strength wasn't in shutting people out, but in letting the right ones stay in. Eli listened closely, then reached into the box and pulled out a faded photo of Alina and Charlie. He looks like you when you laugh, he said. Alina blinked hard. He was my best friend. He still is, Eli said simply. That night, Miles walked into the conservatory and found Alina standing barefoot among the flowers. The glass ceiling above glowed with stars. You stood up for yourself today, he said. I did. Proud of you. She turned. I wasn't sure I had it in me. Turns out, Miles said softly, you have a lot more in you than anyone ever gave you credit for. Alina reached out then, not just emotionally, but physically resting her hand gently over his chest. Thank you, she whispered, for showing me. And in that moment, under glass and stars and memories blooming again, it wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about becoming. Together. The morning sky was deceptively bright with a kind of stillness that usually came before trouble. Birds chirped more nervously than usual. The air felt heavy with something unsaid. Miles noticed it in Eli first. The boy had been quiet all morning, toying with his cereal without eating hands, fidgeting with the sleeve of his hoodie. Alina had greeted him warmly, even made his favorite apple cinnamon muffins, but Eli barely looked up. Everything okay? Champ, Miles asked, crouching beside him. Eli gave a small shrug. Just tired. But Miles knew that tone. It wasn't tired. It was worried. Later after breakfast, Alina found him in the garden sketching with his back to the house. She knelt beside him, brushing leaves off her jeans. Are the dragon peppers behaving, I guess? Eli mumbled. She tried to peek at his sketchbook, but he closed it. I drew a monster, he muttered. It lives in people's heads. Makes them leave. Her heart skipped. Did someone say they're leaving? No, he said, voice small. But that man with the car came. And grown-ups get weird when that happens. They forget things, like how to stay. Alina swallowed hard. Eli, listen to me, she said, kneeling to meet his eyes. When someone makes you feel like you don't belong, it's not about you. And when someone does make you feel safe, that's real, and it's not going anywhere. But he looked away, unconvinced. By noon, Eli had vanished. Miles noticed first. 1 minute he was trimming vines along the fence. The next, Eli's sketchpad was left open on the garden bench, pages fluttering in the breeze. Panic hit like a gut punch. Alina, he called, already running. Where's Eli? She appeared from the back corridor, eyes instantly widening. He was just in the garden. He's not there now. They searched the greenhouse, the guest house, every hallway, every closet. Nothing. Then Alina spotted the broken latch on the side gate, a muddy sneaker print, leading toward the woods behind the estate. The forest was dense damp from last week's storm. Alina ran beside Miles' branches, scratching her arms, breath ragged but unstoppable. He doesn't do well in unfamiliar places, Miles said. He shuts down, or gets fixated. What would he fixate on? Miles blinked. The old train line. He read about it in a brochure, said it was where the quiet goes. Alina's eyes sharpened. I know where that is. They split paths, Miles circling the perimeter, while Alina cut through the lower ridge where wildflowers grew in clusters and the old rail lines curved toward the river. That's where she saw him. Sitting on the mossy edge of a broken platform, knees pulled to his chest backpack beside him like a loyal dog. Alina stopped a few feet away, catching her breath. Eli. He didn't turn. You found me fast, he murmured. You didn't want to hide, she said gently. You just didn't want to feel invisible. He wiped at his face with his sleeve. I thought maybe if I disappeared first it wouldn't hurt as much. Her voice broke slightly. Is that what you think we'll do? Eli didn't respond. Alina sat beside him, silent for a long moment. Then, without speaking, she took off her cardigan and wrapped it around his shoulders. When my brother died, she said slowly, I thought everyone else would leave too. So I started pushing them away before they could. She turned to him. But then, you gave me a red crayon. Eli sniffled. That's just a crayon. No, it was a bridge. It meant, I see you. And you know what, Eli, I see you. And I'm not leaving. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. Not even if the man with the car comes back, especially not then. Miles arrived minutes later, nearly collapsing with relief. He dropped to his knees and pulled Eli into a hug so tight the boy squeaked. You scared me, bud, he whispered into his hair. Sorry, Eli murmured. I thought you were going to go away. Never, Miles said. You hear me? Never. Alina stood a step back, her arms crossed over her chest as if holding in something sharp and raw. Miles rose and looked at her. He said he thought we'd leave because Lucas came. She nodded. We need to show him what staying looks like. That evening, back at the estate, Eli sat between them on the porch, swing a blanket over his lap and hot cocoa in hand. The stars peeked through clouds above. Crickets hummed. I think I don't like goodbye, Eli whispered. Me neither, Alina said. So let's make a rule, no goodbyes here. Just see you tomorrows. Eli nodded. Okay. Miles draped an arm around his son, then around Alina. For a moment, they sat in the kind of silence that only comes when people finally feel safe. You know, Miles said softly, for a runaway you left behind a pretty clear trail. Eli grinned. I meant to. I wanted you to find me. Later that night, long after Eli had fallen asleep, Alina stood at the edge of the garden alone. The moonlight illuminated the stones, the archway, the soil that had seen so much loss and now so much life. Miles stepped beside her. You were amazing today. No, she said. I just followed my heart. Exactly. She turned to him, eyes searching his face. Do you think it's really possible to be whole again? No, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. But I think it's possible to be real and loved. And that might be even better. And then, slowly, like the first unfurling of a bloom, long in winter, she leaned into him. No words, just presence. And the quiet, certain truth that this time, no one was going anywhere. 3 weeks after the runaway scare, Willow Creek had not only recovered, it had transformed. The broken parts had not vanished, but they had been woven into something stronger. Like the cracks in old stone filled with gold in Japanese kintsugi, the estate had become more beautiful because of its past, not in spite of it. The greenhouse sparkled again, not just with sunlight bouncing off freshly cleaned glass, but with life. Planters bloomed with wildflowers. Vines curled lovingly along new trellises, and along one entire wall, hand-painted tiles bore names of children who had visited the property. Eli, Hardicus, Maribel, Theo, and many others written in wobbly letters. Alina stood at the edge of the garden in a sundress clipboard and hand hair in a loose braid that she'd stopped pretending needed to be perfect. Around her, volunteers from the community moved in a practiced rhythm, hauling mulch painting benches, preparing for the big event tomorrow, the garden unveiling. Do you know what today is? She asked Miles, who was fixing the final slat on the new sensory wall. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. If you say your birthday, I'll panic because I didn't get you anything. Not quite, she smiled. Today marks 100 days since you answered the wrong call. He paused. looked around, then at her. Funny how the wrong call turned out to be exactly the right one. "You were my rescue," she said quietly. "You were mine too." Alina's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She didn't need to anymore. She had learned how to feel without unraveling. Inside the main house, Eli sat at the kitchen table with his newest friend Maya, a girl his age with selective mutism. She'd been brought by her aunt a week earlier, and to everyone's amazement, Eli had been the first person she'd willingly communicated with using drawings, hands, and the language of shared space. Today, they were building wind chimes from old spoons and ribbon, quiet music for quiet minds. Alina watched them for a moment from the doorway and felt her throat tighten. This was what healing looked like, not a grand epiphany, but a child humming while they create. A room that once echoed with emptiness, now echoing with possibility. That afternoon, Alina held the first staff meeting in the sunroom. It was just her Miles, a part-time counselor named Rosa, and a local therapist who volunteered every Tuesday. They sipped sweet tea and went over the schedule for the launch. "Do we have enough chairs?" Rosa asked, flipping through the checklist. "Enough to seat a small village," Miles replied. "Press?" Alina asked. Local paper confirmed. Rosa nodded. "They want to feature your story." Alina stiffened slightly. "Don't worry," Miles said, touching her hand. "You control what's shared." She nodded. "I'm not hiding anymore, but I want the focus to be on the kids. The place. Not me. Then that's what it'll be." That evening, Alina and Miles walked the perimeter of the estate together, checking last-minute details. Solar lanterns lit the pathways. The repaired fountain burbled at the center of the courtyard. There was music in the air, soft wind leaves in motion, the murmur of new life settling into old bones. They paused at the memorial garden, now surrounded by benches and flowers in full bloom. A new plaque had been installed beside the one for Charlie. "This garden is for the ones who stayed, and the ones who found their way back." Alina ran her fingers across the words. "Charlie would have loved this." "I think he does," Miles said. She turned to him, emotion in her eyes. "You think we can really do this? Build something that lasts? You already are." "I never planned any of this," she whispered. "I was just trying to survive. Surviving is where most beautiful things begin," he said. Back inside, Eli sat on the couch barefoot, reading a book out loud, quietly as Maya traced the words with her finger beside him. "Do you think we'll have balloons tomorrow?" he asked as Miles tucked him in later that night. "I think we'll have too many." Miles smiled. "What color do you want, green? Like growing." "Perfect." Eli looked up at him. "You think Miss Alina's happy now?" Miles paused. "Yeah, I do. She has the smile that stays now, not the sad kind." Later in the conservatory, Alina stood barefoot among the blooms watching fireflies blink across the lawn. Miles stepped behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "We're not who we used to be," she said. "We're better." "What if something happens again? What if this is temporary?" "Then we love it while it lasts," Miles replied, "and fight to make it stay." She leaned back into him. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I. But I'm not leaving." The words settled into her like roots finally breaking through stone. The night before the garden unveiling, the house glowed with a soft golden stillness. No alarms, no ghosts, only peace. Outside, beneath a sky inked with stars, Miles turned to Alina and reached for her hand. "There's something I want you to know," he said. "What? No matter what comes tomorrow or the day after that, this is home. You, Eli, me, this weird, wonderful patch of earth. It's not where I expected to be, but it's where I was always meant to arrive." She closed her eyes. "Then stay. Forever," he whispered. And in that moment, quiet, lit only by moonlight and the warm breath of spring, the house that had once been a mausoleum became something new. A sanctuary. A beginning. A promise kept. The morning of the garden unveiling arrived bathed in gold. Not the harsh kind, but soft light, gentle and full, as if the sun itself had slowed down to witness something sacred. Alina stood on the wraparound porch barefoot, and still a mug of tea warming her hands. From this vantage point she could see it all, the banners fluttering from the willow trees, the canopies being raised, the tables lined with hand-painted pots and tiny jars of wildflower seeds with tags that read, "Take something that grows." What struck her most was the sound, not silence, not the brittle echo of loneliness that had defined this house for too long, but the music of people arriving, children, laughing volunteers, calling out friendly greetings, shoes crunching gravel, the low hum of new beginnings. Behind her, inside the house, Miles was helping Eli into the green shirt they'd picked out together. The one he'd insisted matched the garden. Maya, now a constant weekend guest, helped pin a leaf-shaped badge to his chest that read, "Junior Garden Guide." The title was his idea. The pride in his eyes. That was all Alina. She exhaled, pressing her palm to her heart. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a return. To life, to joy, to herself. The guests arrived slowly at first. Neighbors, teachers, parents of children with special needs who had heard about the sanctuary Alina was building. Then more came, strangers with curious eyes, caregivers holding trembling hands, skeptics who left with tear-stained cheeks. Alina stood by the gate as they came through, greeting each with a softness that was no longer learned but lived. "Welcome," she said, again and again, and meant it. Miles stood just behind her, offering water bottles, directions, and the occasional joke. His quiet, grounding presence was like the fence posts around the property, unmoving, always there, holding the structure in place. And Eli, he led 3 younger children on a tour of the garden beds, explaining how the flowers were not just pretty but strong, and how dragon peppers were definitely real, even if the grown-ups said otherwise. He didn't flinch when one child cried. He didn't run when the crowd got loud. He stayed and shined. At noon, Alina took the small stage beneath the sycamore tree. Rosa had offered to speak, but Alina shook her head. No more hiding. She stepped up, adjusted the mic, and paused to let her breath catch up with her heart. "Some of you know me. Many of you don't. My name is Alina Royce. This house belonged to my family for generations. It has seen holidays, heartbreak, laughter, and silence. For a long time after my family died, I lived in that silence. I thought it was safer. I thought healing meant disappearing." She looked down, then up again. But then a stranger answered a phone call that wasn't meant for him, and he showed up anyway. Her eyes found Miles in the crowd. He smiled just a little and lowered his gaze like he couldn't quite hold the weight of what he meant to her. That one act of kindness unraveled everything I thought I knew, and planted something new. So today we open these gardens not just in memory of those we've lost, but in honor of those who stayed. Those who show up, those who say, "You are not alone." She gestured to the children now planting sunflowers in the memory bed. This is for them, for you, for anyone who ever wondered if hope has a place in the world. It does, and it grows here. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was better. It was sustained, warm, real. That evening, after the last car had driven away and the lanterns still glowed like low stars along the path, Alina, Miles, and Eli sat in the greenhouse surrounded by what they had built. Not a charity, not a monument, a life. "I liked today," Eli said, his voice thick with the haze of impending sleep. Everyone felt safe. "You helped make that happen," Alina replied, stroking his hair. "I think I want to stay here forever." She looked up at Miles. "Me too." After Eli was tucked in, Miles returned to the conservatory to find Alina sitting in the middle of the floor, the moonlight bathing her in silver. In her lap was a small box he hadn't seen before. "What's that?" he asked. "Charlie's thing," she said. "I hadn't opened it in years. Thought maybe I would tonight." She lifted a worn-out notebook and a tiny toy compass, the kind you'd find in a cereal box. a folded map of the backyard they once dreamed of turning into a pirate island, a photo of them in rain boots, soaked and grinning. He used to say the best adventures begin in the mud. Miles sat beside her, watching her eyes shimmer but not break. "I think he'd be proud," he said. "He would have loved Eli," she whispered. "Would have built him a dragon-shaped wheelbarrow." "There's still time." Miles smiled. She reached into the box one last time and pulled out a card. "Handmade, crayon and construction paper. To Alina. You're the brave kind, the staying kind." "Issy." She looked at it, then at Miles. "I want that to be us. Not just visitors in each other's lives. I want to stay." "Then stay," he said, taking her hand. "As long as it takes, as long as you want." "Forever," she said softly. "If that's okay." He kissed her, then light at first, then deeper, like affirmation, like sunrise, like the end of one long storm and the start of a life rooted in peace. The last light in the house went out just before midnight, but inside every room the warmth lingered, the kind of warmth that doesn't flicker out with candles or fade with applause, the kind of warmth that remains. Because love, real love, isn't built on grand declarations or perfect days. It's built on presence, on quiet choices, on staying even when no one asked you to. And that's what they became. The staying kind. The growing kind. The kind of love you believe in again, because it came in the rain and never left. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Share your city or country in the comments below. It always amazes us how stories like this can reach hearts all over the world. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt tales of kindness, hope, and the power of second chances. Thank you so much for watching. Your time, your presence, and your heart mean more than you know. See you in the next story.